Okay, thanks everyone for coming today to talk about a proposed ARB transition. I want to start by thanking everyone that's here or has worked on the project over the last 2 years. Mark Kamens, Beverly Fierro, Sandy Devine, David DiStefano, everyone will speak later, Jim Jurasic and Diana Mezzanot, Madeline Kay, who couldn't be here, as well as Brad Bell and Michael Heidingsfelter, who made a lot of contributions along the way. The project started a little less than 2 years ago. This is our third phase of the report. What this report does is we try to address concerns regarding the architectural control for the island. And in this phase of the report, we make our recommendation to the KICA board as to what we would propose for a transition plan. Our next step, today, we're going to try to, really, we're here to listen to you and to collect feedback on the report. Our next step will be to present it to the KICA board. If they endorse it and approve it, we would then present it to Kiawah Partners, the developer, for discussions. Our plan, said broadly, is not to take over the existing ARB, as some people ask me about, but it's to form a completely new group housed within KICA and overseen by an appointed committee of KICA members. And as I mentioned, today's purpose is to collect feedback from everyone here. I'm going to actually turn it over to some of our work group members to say a few things, and then we'll open it up to anyone who has questions or input or other feedback. I was not planning to turn through 30 pages of the presentation today. I think most people have seen it, but we'll have it up on the screen if there's anything we need to refer to. So you want to start on that end, Mark?
Okay. I'm Mark Kamens. I've been a property owner here permanent since '99. I've also been a registered architect practicing here all those years. And I've probably worked with ARB over 200 projects, etc. So when I heard this committee was going to be formed, I came on to be a small voice, talk about my experiences of working with them and try to bring maybe a broader scope to it. I think anyone who lives on Kiawah Island, who understands the architecture here, the quality here, you go travel around the world, and you'll see that we have one of the finest. And I think the ARB is extremely important to that, and all the values are there. And we all have certainly war stories of going through all these projects from both sides of the event. So that's why I joined, was basically to just give an experiential ear of all those years, and I'm a property owner.
Much informed me early on that the end product we're getting from this ARB is a great product. That's never been an issue. It's really the process, and it's in any homeowners association. Eventually, the homeowners should get control of the ARB. So the beauty of the island is a result of this ARB and their predecessor developers. I want to make it kind of clear that there's still a negotiation that's going to go on. We're not just going to give them this and take it or leave it. There's going to be discussions afterwards. So we wanted to get public input, and there's timing involved, there's personnel involved. It's a big deal to take this over. And as Kevin said earlier, I don't know how many people said, when are you going to take over the ARB, meaning the existing ARB? We're just going to put our name on the door. That was never going to happen. And I still get that even today, that people saying, when are you taking over? So it's going to be a process. It's a little more involved than just that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Devine. I came late to the party in phase 3 of the effort so far. My background, I've had a long career. You can kind of think of me in working in companies that kind of resemble the Big Four. For those of you who know Big Four, generally, the work that I've done over my career has taken many forms, but it's really been about process consulting. And I've done a lot of work with companies that are transitioning processes from one thing to another. That might be acquiring a company, spinning off a company, transforming some function or whatever. And what appealed to me here, not only I've always been interested in the ARB and sort of what's at the root of the magic of Kiawah. And one of the many things that is responsible for the magic of Kiawah is sort of the consistency and the beauty and the harmony of the island, which in large measure points to the ARB. So I got interested in serving. Kevin asked me to join the, this phase of the task force, which was largely to lay out a very high level kind of preliminary framework for the transition. But understanding that, you know, through community feedback with this session and others, and through, you know, as sort of the key members of the new entity are put into seat, and hopefully there'll be an integration of sorts, the details will start to get flushed out to the ground level. So really this is sort of a framework for timing, some of the key considerations and so forth. The last thing I'll say is, I had the opportunity to sit through, I think it was 3 different sessions of the ARB. And I have to say, I came away really impressed by, you know, by the deliberations that occurred, by the expertise that was evident, by the sort of like underlying desire to solve a problem with the homeowner, with the architect, with the contractor, whomever, as opposed to just say yes or no. There was very little yes, no. It was really around, it could get better. You know, this piece is going to create problems. You know, not only the design of the home or the entity, but the surrounding design with nature principle, which caused me to kind of do some research and realize that design with nature is just not a thing that was invented here in Kiawah. You all probably know this more than I did as I discovered it. You know, it's a body of architectural thought and philosophy that has been adapted and kind of brought to life here in Kiawah. And I think, again, it's kind of at the root of some of the magic. So I was really impressed by that. I think all of us can go around the island and go, God, who approved that? Or, you know, like, why am I being singled out to do X, Y, Z? But when you really look at the big picture, and you sort of look across the river and sort of see the white roofs over on the other side there, you kind of, you know, you really have an appreciation. And I wish that everybody could kind of peek into or have an experience of sort of seeing, you know, multiple projects flow through the ARB and the kind of dialogue and discourse that occurs. That part of the process, in terms of bringing the problem solving aspect to it, the deliberations, the underlying aligned objectives of getting to a good outcome, I think it's fair to say is not in question. To Dave's point, that's not what's going to be different. What we're looking to kind of create a process where that can be built on and potentially make the process even more transparent, more accessible, more understood by the community. Everyone?
And I'm Beverly Fierro, and I've been involved in this committee for all 3 phases. It's been really interesting to see how the project has changed over the last year and actually how our perspective of it is. Especially in phase 2, we did a lot of benchmarking to see what goes on in other communities. And one thing that stood out, I think, in Kiawah is the level of professionalism in terms of the people in the ARB and how it's handled. And I think that's apparent, as everyone was brought up, just by the beauty of Kiawah. And so, you know, there might be a few outliers here or there, things that happen, but overall, the community really looks good. And we want to maintain that look and feel, and we also want to maintain everyone's property value. Jim Jurasic and I, because I have a legal background and he has a lot of background in community development, looked into some of the legal aspects of how we would set up the ARB, and actually we're calling it the Design Review Board just because, just with a little bit different name to distinguish ourselves from the developer ARB, just to help the community with that. And it was a real challenge. It was a real mental exercise as we went through this, because in phase 2, we came up with an idea of what we thought the structure would look like that would make it sort of separate from KICA. But then as we got into the legalities, as we got into looking at like the South Carolina HOA Act, looking at the South Carolina Nonprofit Act, looking at the Kiawah General Covenants, we realized that what we thought we would not be able to do. Unless someone else has an idea that we haven't thought about, we'd love to hear about that. But, realistically, having it under KICA, I think is gonna work well for the community and be more cost effective for the community.
Jim, anything you want to kick off with?
No, I guess Diana's not there. Just, I can just fill in the gaps on the financials. Diana Mezzanote and I worked on the financials as well. And, really tried to, on the revenue side at least, I did a lot of analysis with the current ARB and thank them for being forthcoming and giving us data and information about, what fees they're charging and how they charge them, just a little more visibility into that, and obviously try to reflect that in projecting our revenues. So that's all I have to add.
Thanks.
Hi, Jim. I am here, I'm just in the audience. I don't think I can really expand much on what I've really been said, especially Sandy and Beverly. I can relate to the game about one meeting before Tuesday, and so goes into the third section I participated in, but one thing I would like to say is I too went to several meetings held by the ARB, several other meetings, and I was impressed, and I think the learning from those meetings helped us as a group determine how to move forward, because after observing, we had a better idea about professionalism, about the things that they actually work on, and so it was a great learning experience.
Great, thanks. So with that, I don't think we're gonna flip through the slides, but we are really here to listen and learn. And so I'll open it up for questions or comments or anything that someone would like us to talk about further in the book. Anyone in the room, please? Just so we can get you on camera.
My question is, okay, it will be under KICA, but will it be a separate decision-making process? The group of people, will the ultimate decision be the KICA board? How will that executive session function?
What page is it?
There's a slide.
Yeah, so Beverly touched on this a little bit. As proposed, it would be part of KICA. And legally, something like this, that we didn't want to make it completely separate, because that creates a whole nother set of, page 15? 13. If you make a new separate body, it creates a host of governance, tax, insurance issues. So putting it inside of KICA made the most sense. Having it report up to the KICA board is the only way to do it under South Carolina law. Ultimately, the board of directors of KICA has decision-making authority over everything. But we did, through several phases, talk about the fact that the board, our board rotates, it can be overwhelmed at times, it's burdened with a lot of different things. So we set up the group called the Design Advisory Committee. And the closest thing I can compare that to is the Finance Committee. Let's take a separate set of volunteers, have them appointed by the KICA board. We call it advisory because they technically can't make decisions under South Carolina law, but let them work directly with our permanently hired team to really run as much as they can, come up with ideas, create oversight, collect community feedback, make recommendations to the KICA board. So officially the KICA board is deciding on everything. But we did think it was important to put a whole layer of community members in there to focus on architectural control rather than just make it one more task for staff and the KICA board.
Well, one of the other things is, we clearly didn't want to have a KICA board at their monthly meetings, getting architectural complaints. We had to keep it away from the board, so we have a buffer there. Only a dire case would ever get up to the board, I think.
Okay, so you would just naturally go with the recommendation of this group unless there was some overlying feedback that you received as a board.
So if you take a look at the right-hand side there, you see the KICA COO. And then you see the design review group underneath it, which is the design review group director, which would be a new position. And underneath that would be the staff, design review staff. You see that? They're the ones who are going to be doing most of the work. Like if you have a minor improvement, minor, major, small, that's who you'd be most likely interfacing. And then you have the design review board, and it's gonna be professionals, and we anticipate it'll be somewhat similar to the board we have right now. Because they will be professionals. Now, over in the light blue side, you see the design advisory committee, that is separate. That is not under the KICA COO. Okay, so the advisory committee will be, we're able to separate it out that way. And they will give their advice directly to the board of directors. I think it's what's sort of cool about this design advisory committee, it's sort of open-ended. They can make it what they want. You know, they can meet quarterly, they're gonna be involved in the hiring of the design review group director, just sort of like with the finance, maybe we're gonna be doing that. So it's,
We really try to strike a balance between having, paid professionals making a lot of the aesthetic decisions, but still having member governance in the system.
So the governance part would be, certain appeals, would hit the committee, right? So that would be an escalation from the board. I think it's fair to say, maybe, I hope I'm not confusing things, what you see in the blue there, the design review group, that is structurally, I think, very similar, if not exactly the same as it works today.
I'll speak to that in a minute.
Right. But it's injecting this additional layer of governance, and kind of a more, an additional skills, opportunity. Plus the committee, will provide that kind of guidance and oversight, to the ARB. And that's where the community voice, component.
And there was just the kind of that on the appeal process, so where you have the design review board, there's an existing appeal process, maybe a lot of people aren't aware of that. So we're taking that, we're maybe amplifying it, or just writing it down so people understand what it is, a more awareness of it. And that would, you know, obviously like that, we're going to the design review board, if someone was happy with that decision, it would go to the design, the DAC. But we're not, appeals aren't about design decisions. They're about someone who's treated unfairly, or something that was misapprehended. But not because, you know, you want to figure out a certain color and stuff like that. I mean, we're not getting. Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
You want to address it? Go ahead.
So, I did want to just address the differences between what is being proposed for the membership, I guess, of the design review board, as opposed to what the current ARB has. So the current ARB has 6 members, 1 is appointed by KICA, right? One, excuse me, could you point this way, Simon? I'm losing part of what you said. No, So the current ARB has 6 members. 1 member is appointed by KICA. 1 member is happens to have an architectural background, but is a dedicated property owner representative. And the other 4 are definitely, you know, professionals, and some of them are. So, but the biggest difference though, is that as proposed, the design review group director, as well as their second person, is on the design review board. And as I've shared with all of you, I don't recommend that as a way to set this up. I know that it's good to have professionals on staff as well as on the board. I totally think that's the best approach, but you really want to insulate your staff from decisions ultimately made by the board itself. It's, in my mind, it's the same as if the KICA board had its COO and its director of ops as voting members on that. So, something to think about. That and the dedicated property owner representative is very important. And when it can be someone with an architectural background, that's great. But we've had wonderful ones ones in the audience, who have not and have contributed greatly to the discussion.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Yeah.
Carol Lendor, Parkside. We've had discussions at the regime council level, and it's a little confusing for villa owners because one, they have to get clearance from their property manager and then to do their, whatever they're doing. And then go to the architectural review board. So that if there can be some way to clean that up a little bit, so we're not duplicating it, because some people miss one of the steps doing it that way. And then the other thing they've talked about is how when they had the window issue and changing windows. Well, 8 of the regimes have the exact same windows, and once they've been approved, then it seems like that should be in the books and not have to go through the process, the exact same window. And I know they're trying to do that now with pervious surfaces, multiple regimes working together. So when you might hopefully think about that when you think about representation on your board, as far as making sure that unique sector of villa owners is a little different than regular owners. Thank you.
Thanks. I will say one challenge is technically the regimes have their own sets of rules and documents and covenants. So you'd almost have to find a way for them to delegate to the KICA board, or to do it. Yeah, I think that's more of a legal question than anything else, but
Yeah.
it's something we can.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just writing down, sorry, you're suggesting that on the DAC, that there be a regime representative?
Well, not necessarily, but there should be maybe a consultant or somebody to ask the question, so that things aren't being thought about just for single family homeowners. And then you're missing that whole point of, wait, all, these 1,000 other boards on Kiawah have a little bit different needs. So I don't know how you do it. Personality.
Speaking personally, I think it'd be good to have regime representation on the design advisory committee. The board should take that under consideration.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great.
I think the idea was, like every other committee, to have representation from all the different groups. If possible, to have that representation.
Great, great. Anyone else in the room? Paul?
I'm Paul Hennessy. I am not speaking on behalf of the board, although I am a KICA board member. I just wanted to make a couple of observations. First of all, thank all the members of the work group. I know I don't know how much work is involved with my sentences. It was a lot, so thank you for that. I wanted to just touch briefly on 3 things. The first is timing. I think of this effort in 2 parts. Governance and oversight is one part, and operations administration is another part. And I think the time frame of the 2 parts can be different. Thinking about this, I agree with all the comments that have been made about the success of the historic ARB. We definitely want to get this right. I think the governance and oversight part can proceed perhaps at a different pace than the full operational aspect of it. So my comment would be, I don't know that there have to be 2 completely aligned timeframes. So that's just a thought to think about. The second point is a little bit of a sales pitch. I happen to be head of the KICA governance task force, and one of our covenant amendments has to do with endowing KICA with expanded authority for operating an ARB. Now, the covenant amendment that will be going to the community is not hardwired to this process. They are separate processes, but they are linked. And in particular, in the drafting of the covenant, we stipulated that KICA must approve a plan, capital P plan, that has been represented to the community. So this effort is definitely part of that. And then the final comment that I would make is that I think it's very important as this proceeds that there is some mechanism for feedback from the applicants, from the homeowners, so that if there are glitches in the context of a new sort of operational platform, that we can tweak that as necessary. So whatever we do, we should have a really robust feedback loop from the community, so that as we sort of feel our way here to a new regime, a new process, we understand where maybe tweaking needs to be required. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Anyone online?
We do, we have Todd Loney. Todd, you're unmuted.
Okay, Todd Bonet, 3532 Shipwatch. And again, I want to thank everybody for the hard work they've done on the committee. I had a couple of points, and Amanda, I haven't been through the process myself, so if I'm misstating, let me know. But what I've heard is it's, the application and management process is a bit manual. And I'm just wondering, as the committee is looking at this transition process, if there's a way to have a more automated workflow capability so that residents can come in, see what's going on, documents can be uploaded to a site. I think of maybe, like a project management workflow tool that is out there that could be somehow converted into a member service portal. So that's something to look at. The other thing I had a question on, and Carol touched on it a little bit, is how are you planning on dealing with those areas where there might be overlap with the town's ordinances? For example, the tree ordinances the town is coming out with, the new landscape ordinances they're coming out with. And, Carol and I are focused on this because in the multifamily regimes, we are subject to the town's ordinances. So I just wanted to find out how you plan on dealing with any overlap that there might be with town ordinances. And then as part of that, as you respond to it, I also had a question as whether or not you were looking at changing the scope of what the ARB would be focusing on. For example, if you choose to paint your house the same color, is that something that you will need, approval for here? So if you wanted to respond to those last 2 points, I'd appreciate it.
So a couple of things. One, on our, and I might turn it over to Sandy too. You've been close to this, but one, on our timeline, we recognize we need technology. We decided not to try to build the new group ourselves in this committee, but to prepare a plan, get it through the KICA board, negotiate it with the developer, get someone hired, and then do some of the transition steps in conjunction with the actual staff that will be carrying this out.
Yeah, Todd, your statement about workflow and case management and all that type of thing, we could not agree more. It's not a commentary on the current process. It's really an opportunity to, get people more active and kind of iterating through the process and sort of see all, and be able to ensure everything's correct and kind of moving. So I think it will bring, it can enhance sort of satisfaction of understanding and transparency in the process.
And apologize for interrupting. As part of that, I've come up in the software business, and I differentiate between passive and dynamic applications. A passive application, you have to go in to find out what's going on, versus a dynamic will reach out to you, kind of what we all experience in the B2B world. So to the extent that you could find something that is a good blend between passive and dynamic, I think that would create a much more member-centric application and experience.
I think that, what Kevin's saying is that when the director's in seat, I'm sure there'll be, some set of advisors that will help frame requirements
Sure.
for whatever it is, will satisfy. And there is an allocation in the budget. Not sure it's the right number yet, but there's an allocation in there for technology.
Yeah, they never are the right budget.
Yeah, and there are, and with respect to rules and regulations and guidelines, that's something that we also expect the design advisory committee working with new staff to work on during the first year. You know, one of the things we've talked about are how KICA's rules overlap with the existing designing with nature, and then of course you have to overlap that with the town. One of the things we have to work out with the developer is they own the existing designing with nature that we use. Will we use that? Will we pick that up? Will we run with it? Will we want to modify it? What does the community want? But I think in that we have that block in there for like probably a whole year, or maybe it's 3/4 of a year worth of work of going back, looking at the rules, looking at designing with nature, having community meetings like this, adjusting it if necessary before we fully adopt it and enact it.
Yeah. And Kevin, you and I touched on this briefly in the past, but you know, and some of the things like, you know, paint your house the same color. You know, do you go with an approach of seeking approval in advance or seeking enforcement afterwards if someone doesn't follow that? And just looking at the cost structure here, you know, it's something to think about. You know, does that take a head out if it turns out that we're going to go with an approach of trusting people to use the color palette that is published as opposed to you know, enforcing it if someone does not?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, and I don't think we've solved it yet.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ellen, anyone else online?
No, sir.
In the room, anyone else have questions, comments, thoughts? Mark?
Yeah,
Can I ask you to get you on camera?
sorry.
Make a visual record.
Yeah, Mark, board member, this is more, an open question, no wrong answer, just a question. There's a lot of reference to transparency, which is always helpful. Does that also include an intent that the review board meetings would be public? Or is that something that would be assessed and considered by, for example, the committee, and how they might develop protocols and
We've had a lot of discussion on that very point, because I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think the prevailing tilt on that is there's probably too much transparency in you know, just throwing every meeting of the board open, you know, for complete public. What we try to do is to define something called interested parties, so that you have an opportunity for neighbors or others that do have you know, standing, have reason to be there, to be able to participate in the meetings. But I don't think that it's a resolved issue yet, but I think the belief is like today's meetings, like the meetings that you run currently, you know, you do involve the, you know, various interested parties. There may be kind of an additional layer of folks that are not necessarily at those meetings, but they're not completely public forums, you know, to get the work done.
well, again, I'm not going to do a point of view of one or the other. There might be an expectation for consideration.
But
a lot of times in rezonings, for example, you're giving public notice within a certain number of feet of the property. That allows you to at least be aware of something. You know, I'm not suggesting that again, but I think that will inevitably be a question that needs to be addressed.
The committee, though, those meetings are public, right?
Right, it's not advisory, you know, page 19.
So the new governance layer, I think by statute, those need to be,
They are.
open, right?
I would expect there's a finance committee. They were. But you know, the review of every homeowner's house, I mean, there are people that think everything should be open, and there are people that understand why a homeowner may not want everything, you know, video recorded and put out on the internet. And I think we're wrestling with that. I think when we develop, you know, if we can come to an agreement with the developer and get a timeline, and we have to finalize our own guidelines, I think that's something we're gonna have to nail down.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else online?
Design advisory committee, there we will be, if you look at the page 19, there we will go.
You know, one of the things, like Mark said, if you need a variance from the town, that's public, the signs go out, the notices go out, there are instances that could come up with ARB rules, et cetera, where somebody wants some type of a variance. And I think there should be some type of a notification to neighbors or something along those lines, depending on what it is. Because I know there was one instance where somebody put an addition on the home. It was white trim. The ARB wanted the trim darker because they had a color palette, but the covenants of that regime required a specific white trim color, so there was a conflict. And those type of things we have to, you know, hopefully address, because things like that come up.
Which, may I ask?
No.
I can talk to you offline, David, but I don't know of any regimes that require white trim, so.
Fine.
You know.
When he said that, I'm like, yeah, we had Virginia, Cabot, Virginia, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there aren't a lot. I agree. There aren't a lot.
Pretty sure that's.
Silver moss, or ocean green.
Ocean green.
Ocean greens. Yeah, I'm not sure, but it has come up. But that's a good example of where you can have, and to Carol's point, you could have regime rules, ARB rules, and you can have town rules. And we don't have the answer today, but we realize if we're going to go through this whole process of transition, one of the things we should do is take a look at all the guidelines, and fix anything that we can along the way that people bring up.
You know, one of the things is you have an HOA with special covenants, like only use certain rules, et cetera. Well, that HOA is where you would go if you wanted a variance, okay? But if you take the preserve, there is no HOA up there, and they have a lot of specific covenants. And who has the authority to grant a variance to that? And it's.
Kiawah Island architecturally.
Yeah, I understand that, but, you know, so if somebody's going in for a variance, let's say lot coverage, let's say it's supposed to be 30, they want to get to 36. Well, they go to the ARB for that variance. That's when notice is given to neighbors. Okay, because there have been issues like that, you know, if lot coverage is 30 and they want to do 33%, that should be open to interested parties, as we used before, who would have an interest in that variance. Right now, it's just the ARB says, yeah, you've got it, and the neighbors don't know anything about it.
You have to remember, this group is more of an overview group, and then there's going to be the babies that come off of this group that go through more into the detail about all of this. You know, we're getting another group to basically work out the.
The around 30, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The around 30 and the preserve covenants is around 30. So in practicality, it's always been the 33% that is in design major for those who are.
Anyone else want to add anything? Going once, anyone online?
No.
Any final comments from anyone on the board? So thanks for the opportunity to work on this, and next stop is our the KICA board. Great, thank you everyone for coming. Oh, Mark.
I will say this, that there was some very tough words mentioned to the ARB that we certainly listened to and we'd like to record and repeat.
They're going to be copyrighted.
I think all of us, plus the other board members, would say the same thing. The work that all of you have done and others that have been involved is not only recognized, but thank you. I think it's healthy to have reflection. Now, this is prompted by a transition. But the idea of reflecting every once in a while, doing a 20-second timeout and just sort of reflecting on recent history or how did we get to where we got to, regardless of the topic, I think is always a healthy thing. And that's usually not done. I mean, we would be the first to say we don't take a lot of time out, other than every once in a while during a meeting, we'll reflect on, well, how did that neighborhood get to where it's gotten? So the work that all of you have done has been a very disciplined approach to doing that, not only for yourselves individually, but for the greater community. For those people that have, like people in this room and have joined us remotely, that have taken the time to reflect on what we pulled together. 50 years of modern day history of Kiawah. Who would have thought, right? I mean, seriously. Now, we live close to a city that's what, 350 years old, but look at it, it's still reinventing itself. It's still reflecting on the nature of the evolution of community. You know, that real communities continue to evolve and reflect and adjust and change. Learn by mistakes, make mistakes and so forth. So I'm speaking as one property owner that happens to be on the review board. Thank you for joining me.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.